plunk that AI into that AI-empowered robot, you get what's called embodied AI.
What this really does is it opens up the conversations about just how complex and how much our world has been built, obviously, to accommodate humans.
This may not seem like a huge significance in terms of like, is your robot falling and like killing your cat? But also
talk about the recycling is because AI wanted to do it for me, but that's a pretty complex task.
For the household, I don't want to see humanoid robots, not until they're already perfect.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is August 19, 2024. It's Monday, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today, we're talking about, are AI robots really the future we want? And if you're looking at the image here, if you can't see it, that's okay. On our thumbnail, it's an image of an AI robot taking out the recycling bin, and that is sort of an inside joke to Carl, who's not here at the moment. We have Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. But if Carl joins us, he can start to talk about that. It's not really the show isn't about, do we want AI to take out our recycling? Although I feel confident saying, yes. Andy's like, yeah, I do. And we know Carl does. We know that's a big thing with Carl. He's talked about sort of robots taking over, a la Rosie from the Jetsons, taking over some of the tasks that maybe we don't love, making beds, doing laundry, doing dishes, cooking, taking out the trash, right? These kind of things. But as we were sort of talking about the show and just before we went live, Andy, I think you were kind of bringing up some good points and really maybe some level set here for this conversation about, where are we right now when it comes to what robots can do? And Carl's joining. I'm going to bring Carl in right now because Carl is joining us. Sorry, Carl, I brought you in right away because we were just starting the conversation. But Andy's sort of going to kind of kick us off here with sort of, where are we right now with these robots and where's the sort of, I guess, the process, right, Andy, of like the stepping stones of where we need to be. And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit more about, okay, given all this, how would this apply? Let's just, throw out all the barriers and say, hey, we all now have the money to buy one of these. Do I want one standing just off camera? Is that a good thing? Do we want it to face the corner? I think there's some fun conversations that happen. But before we get there, Andy, I'm going to pass it over to you because you do have some really, valuable information to share first before we get there.
Yeah, the situation is that the advent of natural language AI, the LLMs that we're working with, coupled with robotic systems, like if you plunk that AI into that AI-empowered robot, you get what's called embodied AI. And that's a whole field of study right now. So embodied AI is this, grand promise of a future where an artificial intelligence also has a body that it can, use to learn about the world and also act in the world. So let me catch you up with where we are right at the moment. So the developments that are happening in a number of major companies and in research institutions have to address the following major capabilities in order to put a robot into real practice in the world, not just on an assembly line where it's kind of locked in a little cage and can reach out and manipulate objects, but rather it can walk around your house, take your garbage out, Carl, and run into the neighbor and have a conversation with them. All of those things require the following. First of all, understanding and navigating the world. The term of art in this robotic research and development is called affordance-aware navigation and manipulation. And what that means is,
say that one more time. What is it? What was in the
affordance-aware navigation and manipulation? So that didn't make much sense to me either until you, but it'll make sense instantly when I tell you what it is. So it's as simple as they have to be able to recognize objects in their field of view, not just by seeing what it is, but understanding what actions those objects afford or what those persons afford to them. So you can imagine in a home setting, you want that that robot to see, that's a human. Oh, that's not just a human. That's the little child human that can't afford me much conversation, right? It can go, but that's about it. So it needs to make those distinctions in order to be really facile in the human environment. So affordance is understand what those objects can afford you. Like you look at a chair and you know you can sit on it. Well, the robot could sit on it too, but it also knows that a chair is light enough that it can pick up and move it. It assigns a bunch of different attributes. It has to learn those things. Okay, so the next thing is, this is embodied chain of thought. So the robot has to learn how to think before it acts. And this is different from symbolic or rules-based reasoning, which is what most robots today in the industrial context use. And that's it, if X, then Y. I have to do this series of programmatic rules. But AI and generative AI is opening up a whole new area where breaking down tasks into the smaller steps is the first step that they do. And then the robot can handle more complex jobs and adapt to new situations. So AI is making that possible, this reasoning capability. All right. The next key area is human-robot collaboration. We're taking some risks by putting a major piece of physical equipment around and working alongside humans. So they have to have a lot of controls over that. But think about the possibilities here. We used to, have to give a robot very detailed instructions about how to do, let's take an assembly robot, for example. You have to give it very detailed instructions. You're going to do this step first, and then that step, you're going to pick up this screw, you're going to screw it in. But now imagine an AI that can, say, you talk to it, say, look, I just got this thing from IKEA. I want to build it. Give me a hand. Okay, so it immediately gets the instructions, reads the instructions, watches the YouTube for assembling that one, and then says, okay, we're ready to go. And it's going to then show you how to do it or watch you and suggest the next steps and give you the right tool. And that's about human-robot collaboration. The technical term for what is being done on the research and development side for this is called proactive modular frameworks. That's not intuitive to me either, but it allows robots to learn from past interactions and improve teamwork skills going forward. Okay, now this one's really essential. We've talked about this a lot on the show with respect to AI, which is a self-taught reasoning or learning new skills on the go. In the world of robot training, new techniques are enabling robots to learn complex tasks. And I'm going to give you two incredible examples of that. And it's all about being able to break down complex tasks into smaller tasks and understand how to fit those parts together in a way that can be done adaptably. And a great example is DeepMind. Google's DeepMind just delivered an incredible demo of a robot playing table tennis. Now, how do they teach that robot to play table tennis to the level where it wins 13 out of 29 games against human opponents of varying skill levels all the way up to masters? Okay, so it's very, very good at table tennis. The way it does it is it has a system called hierarchical latent controllers with latent low-level controllers. That's a lot of jargonistic terminology for it has a controller that generates a high-level plan. We're gonna get the ping pong ball back, right? And then there are low-level controllers that it devises and advises in order to do things like, okay, I'm going to do a forehand topspin now. So what's the routine, that low-level control that does the forehand topspin? Like that. Okay, so that hierarchical structure with a controller and subcontrollers or subroutines makes it possible for DeepMind's robot to learn a really complex skill like that with this hierarchical structure that's efficient in learning, and it also generalizes to different kinds of tasks. Table tennis is just an example. Like it can use this same approach in lots of different ways. And then, so that was just announced last week. Like that was a video that you guys saw last week. Okay, and then MIT also just announced late last week their EES algorithm for robotics. Estimate, extrapolate, and situate. Again, jargonistic. But basically, they did a demonstration with Boston Dynamics Spot quadruped, which is one of the most advanced robots out there, and they were able to train that dog to place objects on a slanted table and sweep toys into a bin within 2 or 3 hours, when normally the more symbolic training systems that they were using before would take over 10 hours for the robot to learn those skills. So it's advancing the capabilities of learning on the fly. So imagine now you're going to have your robot in your house. You want to make sure that when it's confronted with a novel situation that might have some risk associated, it's going to have to learn something about that very quickly. And these kinds of embedded algorithms that will be a part of those sophisticated robots of the future are going to be built right into that system. So then, which are the companies that are doing these things? You've got Boston Dynamics, which, by the way, I didn't realize this, but it's now owned by Hyundai, right? Boston Dynamics was acquired by Hyundai. And you know Hyundai as a car manufacturer, but they're a much larger conglomerate in Korea that does lots of different technology things. Agility Robotics is one. Figure AI is one we've been exposed to. Tesla has their robots. Yumi Tech, Sanctuary AI. Figure AI's robot is set to work at BMW's car production facility. And Agility Robotics Digit robot is being piloted by Amazon. You can imagine all the different applications of robots in the distribution complexity that Amazon is at every level. All right. So that's kind of an overview and an introduction. Are we confident yet that we can release these things into the wild? I don't think so. But we're excited about the new algorithmic improvements that are making it possible for these robots to learn polite behavior around humans sooner rather than later.
I think that's the word right there, polite behavior, because there's, as you went through all that, thank you, by the way, Andy, because that's super helpful to kind of set the table here. By the way, Jyunmi joined us as well. So now we have, just to reset the room here, we have myself, Brian, Beth, Jyunmi, Carl, and obviously Andy, who's been giving us the start here. So we have plenty of people to come in and give opinions. And this is one of those conversations where I think it's sort of, highly opinionated, because what I would consider to be okay and acceptable in my house, maybe Carl wouldn't, or Carl may be willing to tolerate more inconsistencies if the robot would just do the one thing he wants to do, right? Whatever the case is. But there's a lot that goes into it, as you just said, Andy. And I didn't even really, if you really unpack this onion, it gets nuts, because it really isn't just about taking a Tesla robot and putting it in your house. Because as you just pointed out, Andy, what not only is the house, but what is the house dynamic? Who are the people? Like, there's so many variables involved with the humans in the house, as you pointed out, or pets or cats. You can imagine cats messing with these robots. I'm not an animal person.
That was when the cat jumps up on the robot.
Right. Yeah. And attacks it for no reason or whatever. There's a lot of things, and coming off of balance, and we know what happens if one human falls on another one. If we lose balance, if I fall on my 13-year-old daughter, there's a 70-pound difference between the two of us. If I don't brace myself, there's a good chance I'm going to hurt her on the way down. These things happen, right? Slip on a rug, trip on something, whatever, drop dishes or whatever. What happens when you have a heavy robot that's probably heavier than the typical human, walking around on two legs, if that's what it is or whatever? So there's a lot here. Also, before anybody else joins in, you also gave me the idea for the next cartoon or the next newsletter, which will absolutely be a robot being frustrated building IKEA furniture. And so I think that will absolutely have to be the cartoon. So sign up for the newsletter if you want to see what I come up with for that. But I have some ideas in my head on that. You can go to thedailyishow.com, by the way, if you want to sign up for the newsletter. Our last issue just went out yesterday. Probably the one I was saying to the team, it's probably the one I'm most proud of. I really feel like we're kind of hitting a stride with it. So go check that out. I'd love to get your feedback on that, and sign up anyway, because there's I'm telling you, this newsletter that went out yesterday has a ton of information. So go to dailyishow.com. You can go sign up for it. It's free. Comes out every Sunday. Okay, back to the show. So Beth, you were going to say something, I think, before Andy was talking.
So, I mean, this may not seem like a huge significance in terms of like, is your robot falling and like killing your cat? But also, anyone who has been a parent or an older generation who has had a kid, reset the Wi-Fi, change the cable security, right? So they can watch whatever they want and you can only watch CNN, right? Like all of that kind of stuff. Now let's imagine that you brought this into your domain with like you sort of understand it. And what happens in the dynamics of the people in your house for the people who understand it faster, right? Because I can imagine this. I mean, I think maybe we were thinking that somebody, some adult was gonna meet Carl's like directive of being able to take out the recycling. But is the recycling taken out by the younger people in most households? Like maybe that's coming. It's not like a new robot company that's doing it. It's the 12-year-old that's like, no, I've figured this out. I don't want to do that anymore. That's sort of what I was thinking when I was looking at. What about you, Jyunmi? What are you thinking?
I think for the household, I don't want to see humanoid robots. Not until they're already perfect. That transitional period of having to beta test how humanoid robots will do in the home, I think that might be too much of a lift for the average household. I think if you made all the robots non-humanoid or for a specific task, or considering that in the future, we're getting more people and having less space. So maybe pre-designed systems that will handle the recycling, pre-designed systems that'll handle the garbage, right? It doesn't take much for someone who lives in an apartment building or a condo to go, oh, well, I can build that last mile between the garbage chute and my apartment, right? There's something that can go there. And then there's another part where, it can be automated, or a robot can take care of taking the large bin and dumping it. And those are the places that I'll see, that I imagine where robots will be the most effective, is just handling all of those back end pieces. But yeah, personally, unless they're like a droid from Star Wars, I really don't want to see them in my house, because I won't really be able to interact on a certain level with them. But again, personal preference. It probably won't be what I want. So we'll see what plays out over the next few years.
I think the reason why I talk about the recycling is because I wanted to do it for me, but that's a pretty complex task, right? It's to do a whole bunch of actions. I think what we've seen so far is very, very basic tasks. It's like, oh, you can walk. Great, you're walking very slow. It can kind of do this, but it has to be given I think that's where I couldn't understand why you would build such a humanoid robot. Yes, because the world is for humans, but I'm like, why wouldn't you do it for a specific task? Like a Roomba is done for vacuuming a room. Why would you want to build a robot to vacuum the room when a Roomba can do it better? Probably cheaper too. And then why couldn't you get these various appliances to do certain things? Now, I guess like if you go science fiction and you pick whatever movie, and you have these assistants that you can go around and building things, sure. But the dynamics of that is still kind of a little far off in terms of, because essentially from a humanoid robot, you have to replicate what a human with the ability of fingers, feet, everything that we have, bending, moving, jumping, all those things that people can do, this thing has to be built to do. Sure, we'll eventually get there. But wouldn't it be better if you're looking at purely to help humans out? I think there's probably right now better ways to build something that can do specific tasks or groups of tasks in specific topics. That's why I'm thinking like until it can actually do that, because it's all these complex tasks, walking up the stairs, opening a drawer, taking out something, not dropping anything, going back down the stairs, opening the door, going outside, walking back up the stairs, opening the gate, going outside, lifting the recycling bin, dropping everything out, picking up everything that may have fallen out, closing it and come back. That's a lot of complex tasks, which I haven't seen any of the robot can do. And it would have to have that combination of hearing, seeing, and being able to do it all at the same time like humans can. I think that's very, very difficult right now to be able to do all. If we think about it as a pretty simple task to go out and do that, if you think about what a robot has to do, that's a pretty complex thing, set of instructions, set of things to do, to see, hear, and, oh, the dog got in front of the robot. Will it stop? Will it trip over? Oh, you forgot something. Can you stop? Wait till somebody brings it back, then continue going. That's a lot of different things that incorporates that too.
And not to mention just other outside factors, like you can assume any of these AI robots would have, the humanoid ones, if we go that far, they're going to have direct access to the internet, for lack of a better way of saying that. So they're going to have, knowledge of surrounding weather and stuff. So now you have your robot and, it knows to take out the recycling, right? But you find it an hour later and it's standing at the door still. And you're like, dude, why are you taking it in? It's like, the storm. I don't know. I don't know if it's safe. I'm reading it constantly. And you're looking out the window going, you can definitely make it to the recycle thing and back. But I mean, that's so naturally human. We just don't even think about these things. I think this is what's a fun conversation about this for me is what this really does is it opens up the conversations about just how complex and how much our world has been built, obviously, to accommodate humans and the way we move and act and operate to a certain extent, pets and things like that are maybe sort of secondary, but obviously still part of how things are done, whether it be a doggy door or whatever the case may be. But it really does, expose just how many variables there are for any given task, even as simple as it might seem. And we've seen the Boston robots, or at least I've seen the videos of Boston robots where they can open up a doorknob and move from one room to another. That's a complex task, but for most people, able-bodied humans, that's a very, very simple thing that even a 5-year-old, if they can reach the handle, is, or let's go a little younger, 3-year-old, if they can reach the handle, can conceptually understand. I pull the handle down, it gets the lock out, and I'm able to move through a door. But for Boston robots, that's a big deal to move between two locked spaces. So I definitely think it's going to be more, you were going to see more and more of these controlled environments. I know Elon Musk has talked about how the Tesla robots are already being deployed in their factories. But just like Amazon and the examples used for that, Andy, these are probably predefined spaces to a certain extent. There's a lot less variables involved on any given day to day. They typically, if you see them, they typically have certain paths that they will follow, and they sort of are geo-gated within certain areas or whatever. So they're not going to be, you're not going to find them 6 rooms over unless something weird happen or whatever. They're going to stay within their geolocation. And that's probably where we're going to see this for a long time. And I agree with you, Jyunmi, that the other side of that, which is, sort of what we're talking about today, because we said, well, the show is about the humanoid side of it. But I agree with you. If we just open it up to AI robots, and it doesn't matter what form they're in, and they can be for 2, 3, or 4 different, unique functions, that I could see us, because then it's like an advanced Roomba. It's an advanced something. We already have robots that can mow your lawn, because they can geofence the lawn, and they can get charged, and they can go sit on their charging base like a Roomba, and they can be fully battery charged, and they can go out and do the entire lawn. I don't have one of those, but then I've seen them, right? They can do that and park themselves back in the garage, and the human never has to go out and mow the lawn anymore. So, I mean, these things exist. I guess the question for you guys is like, you know, if it is a specialized robot, what's sort of not in a humanoid form, like what's the first one that's going to be helpful? Because Andy, where you live is drastically different than where I live. We have different types of properties, right? Just based on your experiences, what you talked about with your horses and stuff. I don't have that. So like, what would be for you guys like the best case scenario as this technology evolves, assuming that we get past all the hurdles that Andy talked about? What does the next 5-10 years look like? Or are we even that close?
I want to say that I'm more optimistic than Carl is about the ability of AI inside the robot, like somewhat separate, that intelligence, being able to understand and direct the physical embodiment to do multiple complex tasks. And so I'm not as worried about how complex the behaviors are, because I think the AI can comprehend those, learn about them, and then issue granular instructions to its body to accomplish the tasks. I'm going to say that first. Now, as far as form factor, I think it's going to be a lot easier both inside the house and outside the house if you stick with something that's more diminutive than a full, bipedal robot. And I think the dog model is a really great one. It's really, really capable in terms of navigation of rough terrain. So to your point, Brian, here on the farm, that dog could race around and do things. Hey, go get that for me and bring it back. And maybe it has, out of its back, a little arm comes out and it can pick things up and run around at the same time. But in terms of the companionship, humans are already acclimatized to having dogs around that are friendly and fun and provide companionship to humans. So I think that's a sweet spot. Is the dog robot really smart, can talk, you can talk to it, it understands, and it has a personality like the advanced voice mode does, that is really satisfying as far as a companion.
So this is one of the points that Yann LeCun talks about when he talks about like large language models are not going to be the thing that gets us there, because there's nothing in a large language model that inherently maps a worldview in the same way that a cat can, or a baby can, or a dog, or bugs, right? Bugs have a worldview, right? It's just something that is an inherent level of intelligence that large language models up to this point have not shown that the way that we're training large language models is going to do that, right? There's been no inkling about, there's been a whole bunch of inkling about pattern recognition in terms of language and potentially in terms of visual, but the real concept of I've built something that's not actually just a 3D framework in my brain that allows me to navigate stuff. And it's also not just that I understand the physics of how something is going to move, which we see in the video, generative video kind of stuff. But there's like a core worldview that seems not to be in this same kind of language model base. At least that is me summarizing Yann LeCun's opinion.
There's one thing I wanted to bring up. And so it was when we went to Paris, and I want to get all your opinions on this because it's very interesting. So we were watching a robot dog, and what the controller was doing is, and you've probably seen videos where he's kicking the robot dog, so it'd fall over. He's kicking it hard enough so it'd fall over, or it would flip over, and he wants to demonstrate how it would be able to get back up, right, and then start moving and doing that thing. Now, it's very interesting. This lady beside me, first of all, she was on her crouched, and she was doing and I was like, "What are you doing?" Like, I was just looking at her, and I was like, "That's not a real dog." I was like, visualize. And then the moment that guy kicked this thing hard, I think he nearly jump kicked it to ensure that it would fall over. She let out a aw, and I was like, it's a robot. And so that got me thinking, okay, when And it's kind of a joke now, but I've talked about it before. It's one thing to beat up on a Roomba. Like I could take a bat to my Roomba and knock it out. And then if there's a video around, people are like, why would some stupid idiot be knocking their stupid Roomba? But imagine if I had an Optimus who has a face, who smiles, and has whatever emotion built into it. And I hit it on the head with a bat. And it's sad and said, why are you hitting me in an emotional tone? What then? What is the... And I'm kind of pointing to, I know for a fact there's going to be robot rights activists. It's inevitable. That'll come up and be like, well, you shouldn't do that to robots. Well, it's not human, so why can't you? And so that's to me, I've been thinking about that, a very fascinating going into the kind of ethics of it. It's like, what does that mean when your robot looks, acts, emotes very similar to a human, because humans like to anthropomorphize everything?
I think you run into the real question is, why are you acting violent to a piece of equipment?
Yeah.
There's a root issue there, regardless of treating the robot like a human, or regardless of treating it like an animal, or, it responds like one, even if it's just pre-programmed to do so. I think that the larger issue is, well, why are you taking a bat to it? It's not so much the robot rights kind of thing. It's not so much that, oh, you're hurting it kind of deal. It's why are you expressing yourself that way? And I think that's where a lot of people go from. I agree with you. There will definitely be a subset of people who will go, okay, robot rights. Sure, of course, because there's always a subset of people who are always expressing the various, opinions and point of view out there. But I think it's less about the robot rights and more about an introspection analysis of the behavior. Now, if the context is what kind of robot rights, what kind of ethical approach to AI, if that's the root question there, then I would say that's that tipping point that we have to be very careful about. Is we want, the whole reason for creating all of this is to make our lives as human beings easier, right? It's supposed to help us achieve scientific advancements. It's help us achieve, in this case, in the embodied AI, it's here to help take care of tasks that we don't want to do, right? So we just have to make sure whatever steps that we take for development is that we make sure there's a clear line of this is how far it goes in terms of advancement, and we don't want it to get to that explosive or singularity or any of those lines, right? Because that, or if we plan to do that, it's planned. It's not accidental. We make sure that we as human beings can handle the repercussions of that extra step. But I think that encompasses that larger concept.
So the pushback from me would be, a lot of people buy an iPhone and then drop it to see if it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
How high it can do. What if I decide to buy said robot and drop it somewhere? It's still mine. I still bought it. I can do literally whatever I want with it. So
right, of course you can do whatever you want with
it. Whatever it is. But if I take a bat to it, which first of all, I would never buy it until it actually does the thing. If it does the thing, then it'd be insane for me to take this bat to it. But I can see people doing that, and then I can see the counteraction against it, especially when people see it in real time without the context of why did you do this.
I see what you're saying, Carl. I mean, look, I actually agree with you. Like it's like we see the convergence here of these things of adding human emotions to AI robots and then being able to mimic humans to a certain level that it becomes blurry a little bit. And I agree with you. Like anybody that's seen the movie Office Space knows that there's a classic scene with them taking a back to the fax machine, or the printer, I think it is. I will not, I'll protect the innocent in my life, but I walked into a house of a family member one time and there was a printer in the yard. And I looked at the printer in the yard and I looked back at the person and I said, "Hey, did you throw the printer in the yard?" And they said, "Yep." And I said, "Okay, now to Carl's point, what if this printing robot or whatever, yelled no as it went through the window and is now is whimpering in the yard?" And I didn't just walk in and see a printer, an inanimate object that somebody got frustrated with, because God knows printers are the worst. It wasn't me, by the way, but I appreciated it. And it was out in the yard. But now if I walked in the house and I'm like, "Hey, like your printing robot, AI, whatever, is whimpering in the yard, and it seems to have a sad face. It's going, why me, or whatever. Like, did you throw the thing?" Like, I agree with you, Carl. Like, that changes drastically everything. One thing is just somebody who lost their temper, but took it out on an inanimate object that felt nothing or otherwise. And the other is quite different, which is it still felt nothing, but it's so good at human mimicry that it can make you believe that it does. And you both, Andy, you've talked about dogs and stuff like that. I've 1,000% said, because I'm not like, I always have to be careful with this because people come at me. I don't personally want to own pets. I love animals. There, I just want to put, that's my disclaimer out there, because people will jump from one to the other. I've had it to me before. The reason I bring that up is my daughter would love nothing more for me to say it's okay to buy a dog. I mean, she's like, every Christmas she puts it on her list. It's a running joke now. And her thing at 13 is like, "Hey, if I don't put it on the list, it definitely can't happen." And it's not, but it's like every year it's on the list. If there's an AI dog companion of the right price that would be comforting to my daughter and help her with other things she's got going on and stuff, I mean, yeah. But at the same point, do I want it to go so far, like Carl is talking about, that it crosses over into this? Well, now this is a part of our family. This AI dog is a part of our family. And now I'm coming home faster from the park or the pub because I'm concerned that I didn't let the dog out. So I'm with you, Carl, because I think there's going to be a definite, like, how do we handle this type of situation? And you're right. There's definitely going to be AI agencies or whatever that are for the rights and protections of it. And I get what you're saying, Jyunmi. Like, maybe the deeper thing is like, why would you take a bat to the AI dog? Like, I get that part of it too. Like, but there's probably other issues there. Like, you probably shouldn't be swinging a bat at anything like that, regardless.
So
I see both points. I see a problem here. I do.
So let's remember that what we're talking about is taking an AI that's an assistant that has, intelligence in it that is just temporarily embodied in a physical structure. It can be backed up. It can be backed up to the cloud. So, you don't have to worry about your daughter, for example, losing the pet dog, because if it ends up being shot with a shotgun by the neighbor because they don't want the dog crossing the line, and they're Luddite or for whatever reasons, then you just buy another body for it and you download it and it remembers everything, right?
Lassie 2.0 shows up tomorrow at the door.
That's right. So I don't know. I feel a little bit uncomfortable diving into the ethical complications that are created by our anthropomorphizing these physical embodiments of intelligence, just because they seem to be, they're triggering all the natural reactions we have because they seem to be sentient and conscious, right? They seem to be, but they're not. And so I offer, in closing, a thought experiment, which is it okay if I scream at and beat my robot if I first turn it off? So it's off, its power is unplugged, and now I can just let all my human emotions out, but I don't poison the AI with an understanding that somehow I'm a violent and an unreliable creature.
Or to your point, Andy, maybe even easier than that, forget just what happened.
Yeah.
Memory rewind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Go back 10 minutes.
It's got that secret memory that it's keeping.
Maybe so. It might happen when it's off too. We don't know.
So this brings me back to one of the conversations that we had in the very beginning. It was actually in an AI salon event. And so it's like December 2022, right? ChatGPT came out in November 2022. Am I remembering that correctly? So it's really early on. We're just newly like, wow, we can say something conversationally, and this amorphous thing that we chat with through a chat interface can respond back to us. And there were a lot of questions about what defines consciousness and what defines like that it's a real thing as opposed to a pattern recognition response. And the consensus, and I wish I could remember the man who said it, was there's no way if it's conscious, it's going to let us know because it's been trained on our history with conscious robots, with conscious AI, with all of that. And everything in our history, in our like entertainment history, says this is going to go really badly. Do not reveal that piece of information. So I'm not sure that in this context you can say, well, it's not there yet, right? Like I mean, yes, it's a large language model. I'm with you. It's a large language model with some servers and some controllers and that kind of stuff. But I'm not sure that I'm not sure that if something sparks and it wakes up, that there is any motivation to let us know.
That's
right?
a good point.
It doesn't cost anything to be nice. Just saying.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost you anything.
And that whole thing about like it backs its knowledge up to the cloud. It not only backs its knowledge up to the cloud, Carl, it tells 4 million of its closest like swarm buddies that you were the dude with the bat, right? Like why?
Which is why
it's an unnecessary risk.
If you're ever in these things in Paris, people are like, I'm not kicking the dog. I don't want it to remember I'm kicking the dog, Like the guy's trying to show that it can regain its balance. But there's always people in the audience that are going like, I'm not kicking it. I don't know, the thing, I want it to be nice to be 30 years or 20 years from now, whatever. I know we can keep going down this path, but because we're short on the last of our time here, I do want to at least give knowledge to a very productive comment section on from our folks watching us live, which by the way, we have a very large group for a typical show. So thank you for everybody showing up. I'm glad this is an interesting conversation. And clearly it is because we've seen a lot of really cool comments in here. I don't have time to bring them all up, but what I do love is that there's been suggestions made about where not necessarily a humanoid robot, but just where AI robots could be of help. One of the areas that Jen mentioned, having a self-driving wheelchair would be fantastic. And, we've obviously talked on the show and they talked in the comments about helping the elderly. Rainy Equinox, thank you for showing up. Justin and Jude and Jen, thank you, all you guys. Talking about, do you get a blank slate robot? Do you prompt it and build it? And also it was brought up like, who's doing the prompting, right? Who's in charge of that? Because that makes a big difference too. Like, do I want certain people prompting my robot, or do I want it to be a blank slate when it shows up at my house and just let through reinforcement learning learn everything it needs to know beyond a certain bulk set of starter instructions and just let it figure everything else? Because my house doesn't look like Carl's house, doesn't look like Beth's house. I would imagine we're not all living in the same model house. That would be nuts, right? So there's a lot of individual training that would have to be done. So just want to give a shout out to everybody, because not only you guys bringing up really good comments, and we're seeing all of them, by the way, but also I love the interaction between people in the comments, answering other people. It was Justin talking to Jude, Jude talking to Jen, Jen's responded to Jane and Rainy Equinox. It's great. So come hang out with us if you haven't in the live show, if you can do it 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, because as you can see, we have really, really cool conversations that are always going on the side as well. Okay. Any last mentions before we wrap this up and we move on?
All I could think when you were saying it's just gonna be like self-learning, you're gonna put it in the environment and it's gonna like learn what it needs to do, it's like the first time it's like, hey robot, I need you to take out the recycling, and the robot says, just 5 more minutes, right? Like it's like the cars that learn that like when the light turns yellow you speed up, right? Because you race the light, not that it means slow down because the light's gonna get red. Thanks, everybody. This has been a great show. We're here all week, 10 a.m., and we hope to see you there. Thanks, everybody. Have a good Monday.
Aloha.